Elephant Man.
Don't you wanna know? Don't you wanna know about love? Wanna know?
Hello. Welcome to February the 15th, 2025. Dan and I here. For those of you that desperately miss Seb, he'll be back.
Yeah, he's got a strange work schedule at the moment. Can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Because it said your microphone is muted, but I think because I switched over to the Yeti and out of the iPad mic, so that's probably why it gave me that. All right, so hi. I've been struggling today because I have a psychological block against passwords and things, so we'll do something that's pretty short today. I want to do a little podcast on, of course, love, because that's what we do. We are the Love Foundry. But I want to do it on the three aspects of love. Well, on three aspects of love. There may not the three aspects, because I think there's another aspect of love that we don't probably even know about, but we will eventually, I suppose. And so hang on, because I have to get myself aligned to it. I've been looking at the relationship between the human personality as a unity, the whole human personality, the whole planetary human personality, which takes everybody's personality into account. Now, in the esoteric world, they call that the dweller on the threshold, which is the accumulated rejection of love as an entity, all added together, which is kind of a big monstrous thing in a way. But we each have a little piece of this, some more than others. And so transforming that with love into an expression of love, a pure expression of love, which would be the opposite of that, being Christ consciousness, seeming opposite, but the personality of the Christ would be absolute love. But there's also the personality of the mother, and then which is an entirely different thing. And from our point of view, from the Christ point of view, he's the son of a father and a mother. And when that happens, the son has both the mother and the father in it. So from one point of view, the Christ consciousness is a complete unity of everything that ever went before. And from another point of view, the will aspect of love, the first aspect of love, as they call it, is the father aspect, and which would be the spirit aspect from a certain point of view. Remember, all of these are from points of view. And my point of view is certainly no better than Taylor's or Seb's or anyone in the audience. It's just another point of view. And whatever the Christ's point of view about these things that we bring up and talk about, none of us have a clear perception of that. We'd like to think we do, maybe, but his point of view is a little more inclusive than ours in all directions. So there's that point of view, which is the father, and there's that point of view, which is the mother. And so let's look at those and see a bit of how we can synthesize all three of those in ourselves, because I think that's what, if we're going to embrace the coming consciousness that is that spirit, that mother, and that son consciousness, all three aspects of the Trinity is not something Christianity made up or we made up. It's been around a long, long time. You'll find it in that original division in almost everything. Do you think that's true, Taylor?
Yeah, it goes by different names. Christianity, it's that, the Holy Ghost, and that's the mother aspect, right? They don't call it that. They call it the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, generally.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, and it's different in any culture, but it's always a trinity. It always has the three aspects.
So what would you think of as the Holy Ghost aspect? Start with that one.
Well, I mean, it's the
For you,
mother.
how does that live in you?
Well, that was one that I never clearly understood. And after doing some of this work with meditation and looking at that spiritual aspect of the Holy Ghost, and the mother, it was always, it was it's like the holder of things, it was like what held you close or what held you in relationship all together. That's how I always looked at it before. And then
Okay, I
after,
think I haven't really looked at it like that exactly, which I certainly don't have any disagreement with. I think that which holds all things in relationship is the mother, is the feminine, is the universal feminine. And I think the name, maybe the name is wrong. I mean, Holy Ghost is perhaps not what it should be called. Perhaps it should be called
that's why it
Lilith.
always confused me, it
Yeah.
always, because it was the Holy Ghost and I didn't never really understand what it meant by
Well,
ghost.
you're not Catholic.
Yeah.
See, if
No,
and
not,
I don't know if being Catholic would help, because the church puts out these proclamations about things. I don't remember anywhere in the Bible, which I'm not a Bible scholar. I just love the story. But I don't remember anywhere how that's described by Jesus or his buddies. I'm sure there are some. In fact, I'll look it up, and so I can add information to what we're actually up to here, because what we're doing at the Love Foundry is not founded upon any church or religion. And in fact, it's not even founded upon the event of the Christ or Golgotha or resurrection. It's not based on those things. It's just engaged with them and involved with them because those things happened. And because they happened, they have a tremendous impact on the history of the world and the history of love in the world, and certainly upon the divine feminine. I've always been a fan of the mother aspect in the Mother Mary thing, which is the Marians, as they say in the Catholic Church. That's a big feminine thing. And she makes apparitions all over the place. And what's interesting about it is her name was not even Mary. Things get confusing out here in the world of personalities. And so,
well, it's a lot of time. There's a lot of time that, things get a little jumbled up, but you can always
well,
feel them.
and the explanations are scholarly but not convincing to people. They go, look, his mom's name is Mary and Joseph, and that's that. So we settle on things, and then we don't want to go back and say, what do you mean she wasn't Mary? Mary was her sister, apparently. Now, I'm like I say, I'm not a Bible scholar, but apparently her sister's name was Mary, and her name was Sophia. And Sophia is Greek for, I don't know if it's Greek, it probably comes from Latin, but Latin Greek probably comes from Sanskrit before that. But her name means literally wisdom. Mm-hmm. So that gives us a clue about the mother aspect being called wisdom. And so, so look at that for a minute. And we're not trying to tell anybody what they don't know. What we're asking you to do, and we always do on podcasts like this, is to look within yourself and see what rings true for you. If you look in the intellect to see, oh, that's right, I read it in a book somewhere, then that's going to be just kind of a waste of time. But if you look within yourself to see what registers with your intuition, with that knowing that is the knowing of the mother principle, everywhere in the universe, the answer is going to be the same. I don't care where you go in the universe, the truth of what we're talking about is going to be the same. There isn't a truth about the Trinity on our earth that isn't true on some other earth or some other solar place, because that's just how it is. So we're figuring that out and trying to strip away the illusion and glamour of love and be able to allow us to deal directly with it. So Isis is a previous name for Mary, and Eve is a previous name for Mary, which was the mother of basically the race that's on the earth now, the Aryan race, the last version of humanity. The race before that is more of a Kuan Yin kind of character, because that's Asian or Oriental. And then it goes back into Isis, which the Egyptians had as a name for the divine feminine, and Lilith, which goes before that somewhere back in there. And these are different characters in myth. And if you go into Greek myth, the only problem with Greek myth for the rest of us is that we can't interpret it. Because, I mean, symbols are a little bit mystical. The symbol of Zeus and Prometheus, for example, where he goes and gets the fire of the sun and gives it to man, is symbolic of the delivering of that by a type of being. Prometheus, the name, but who is that? What is he in the universe? He's not a human being, although in the Greek myth we see him as somebody who seems to be sort of human, but that's because we humanized all those guys. And we say, well, it's a myth, as if that were something not true. Because something is a myth, like Hercules, does not at all mean it was not true. And so interpreting these symbols of Prometheus, just to finish with Prometheus, so he goes and gets this stuff and gives it to humanity, right? And Zeus shows up, dad, and says, well, what are you doing? You're giving them stuff that I haven't given them. And so he punishes him. It looks like he punishes him because he straps him down to a big rock, and the vultures come and pick at his liver. And so then those are all part of the symbol of what's going on here between Prometheus and Zeus. See, that's two aspects of the Trinity. The sun being in Prometheus. See, Prometheus goes to the sun, right, and gets fire. But he also got a lot of other things, which aren't as obvious because that's all we kind of remember from when we covered. You've probably been teaching Grecian history to your kids, and it's maybe just as screwed up as this. But we have to remember. I know, because we know there's something true there. Mm-hmm. There's something true there. But we don't know what's going on because we're not looking at Zeus as the overbeing, whatever that overbeing is. That's the first aspect, the father. He's the one who's generating the universe. And then we don't look at Prometheus as a character and as an offspring of his. But in the Grecian legends, they know who was the offspring of who. And we must remember that we're looking at Greek legend as it was passed down to us from Archimedes and those guys way back in the drift. So what can we say about it except that what the challenge that Zeus is placed upon humanity is before we ever developed anything that had the sun aspect or the mathematical aspect or the consciousness, the other gifts that Prometheus delivers to people. He's passing out all kinds of party favors from the old man, but not with permission. So these things he gives out, and what they immediately develop in the human being is pride. Of course, because that's who we are. Look what I got. I got Dad's magic wand. So Zeus in the character, as his symbolic energy in the character, is to push against that pride. Because if somebody doesn't push against the pride, we're just going to go off the trolley with it. So what you're really seeing here is this spark of evolutionary development in the mind and spirit and heart and emotions of man. And then we see Zeus pushing back against that to slow it down a little bit and balance it and try to keep it from running off the rails. And now there's a lot more to that story, which is really worth delving into. And so all the other Greek myths are symbolic of the development of humanity from out of the mists long before the Christ event in humanity. That changed all that, because that's the new story. But at a time when the Zeus story was what was going on, humanity was connected to that story. And then when a new story comes along, we didn't just include this. like a new kid of Zeus or something. We didn't know how to connect any of the new stuff to the old stuff. And we'd already gotten past that. That was like, 3 or 4, 500 years story-wise before Christ, and back where the Buddha was talking to people and teaching people. So, and when we go away from the Greek myths, we get into the Hindu myths and all those kind of myths, Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita and those things, and they have their own stories based on who was interacting with who in the multidimensional world. And we can assume we made all that shit up, but you'd have to be a godless existentialist, which we got plenty of, to think that all of this stuff is made up by humanity, that there's no basis of truth in any of it. The Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Bible, Krishna, any of it, that it's all just cooked up stuff because we were all smoking the dope. So when we think about all of this, we realize we don't have the faculties in our mind to centralize all of that into one visible story, because we can't collapse time like that in our consciousness unless we could go to some level that we haven't yet gotten to, which is up there in intuition, or up there above our brain mind, where maybe you can see the whole time cycle as one event and realize, oh, these are just things that are happening in the stream of growing into who humanity is. So the mother aspect, which we're looking at first, starts way back. Now, how it formed, and now when I say way back, I mean probably previous to this universe. Presuming reincarnation is true, this may be just the latest version of an entire universe created by whatever cooks up universes, which would be the same being that cooks up reincarnation or cooks up the reappearance of an increasingly growing intelligent life, which is, right now we got a lot of commentaries about that, intelligent design, and various, even physicists now asking ourselves, is the universe a conscious thing? And of course it is. So we look at conscious, because where do you think consciousness is confined to this little dirt ball? Now, consciousness in the form of itself, as it actually is one thing. Consciousness in terms of how we interpret it in our personalities is another thing. And that's why we're looking at it. The Greek stories are an interpretation of consciousness by us. And we have to realize that our interpretation, however we love it, because it's ours, is just ours. And this includes the Christ experience, and this includes all experience. We're looking at a universe full of surprises. And how we interpret those surprises in terms of those beings that cause those surprises is probably not the way they're conceiving them or viewing them or thinking about them. And in the mother aspect, I see that the Holy Ghost, I think, now this is just because I'm like you, it would always bug the shit out of me to figure out what's the ghost got to do, as if the ghost aspect were less real than the mother aspect. So I really didn't think very deeply on that, quite frankly, because I didn't invest myself in the church or in the Bible in that way or in any of that. I just went along with it because we all like mothers, and we sort of like the idea that Mother Nature is a positive force. But I think today we have to stop and reckon it. We have to take a look at it. And I think what you understand when you see it is that love in nature, what I would call cosmic love, as it applies to the whole universal nature, is what is in the feminine. And it's completely intelligent. See, the point of it being a completed spirit is it's the spirit of intelligence surrendered to love. The Divine Mother is absolutely loving. And you can argue this, because I'm not proposing it as an absolute. I'm just suggesting to think about this in yourself.
Well, that's what makes it holy. Yeah. The
Well,
holy part of the ghost.
yeah, exactly. Holy being sacred, being
Right.
but sacred. If you don't believe in love, if you don't have faith in a living energy greater than intelligence, then holy has no meaning. It doesn't. Well, it has a meaning, but it doesn't have that meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Holy would be like really good stew, great whiskey. That's holy, because that's what we want. We want perfect white lightning. And so we would call that holy because it's perfect. But you're equating holy with sacred, and you're equating sacred with God or spirit or spiritual, and you're equating those things with love because in you that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's in you. Well, it's in me too. I equate all those words on an upward pyramid. And when you look at the Great Pyramid and you don't see the capstone, it's missing. Everybody's agreed the capstone is missing. Some people think it was made out of gold and hidden somewhere in the desert, and maybe it is. I don't know. But that capstone is that thing at the top, that thing that the universe treasures above all other things. And because it's not in man, remember from one point of view, the entire Great Pyramid is the history of man in stone. All can be equated into dates, every little measurement in it, everything up the king's chamber, all that. There's a whole system of measurement. And it was worked out by some guys back in the 30s based on the British inch. And then out of the close to the British inch, really close. But out of that, which is interesting, because how did we come by the British inch? And out of that, we came to the measuring stick, the yardstick of the Egyptians, which is what they used for measurement. And it was divided into little minor measurements. So the whole thing is built according to mathematical dimensions, which can be transferred into time. And then you see the whole history. And as an example of that, when you go up the passageway to the king's chamber, you have to bend over at the beginning because it's a cave. It's like dug out of the rock. And when you think they built the whole thing out of bricks, they didn't really need to do that because they didn't build the whole thing and then dig a hole in it. They built it that way. In fact, the little passageways, the small little square passageways that go out to the very side of it, cut right through all those blocks at all angles and then point to things like Sirius and Orion's belt, which is all involved, and all that kind of stuff. So the point was that you have to bend over because humanity was not yet illumined with its mind. And the place going up to the king's chamber where you straighten up and it suddenly becomes the grand gallery, that's where humanity in time became illumined. And if you knew the measurements, you could go back and see when that happened relative to the cycles that they're using. So that's an odd kind of idea, which I'm not trying to prove. I'm just pointing out that some people worked that all out, and the book is out there somewhere. I had a copy of it. I don't know where it is now. I figured I met up with that back in, I don't know, 60s, when the people who, and they kind of got bad press, by the way. They did a great job of figuring it all out, but they missed a measurement. And because they missed a measurement, they predicted the Second World War, and they were off by 3 years. So that lost them their credibility. They were doing great, and that's what hubris will do for you.
Do you recall the author for anyone that
No,
check this out?
It was a team of guys. It was 2 or 3 guys that did it. Okay. I could probably find it. Look,
okay.
Google has
Google British in the 30s.
Yeah, Google. I think they were British. Some of them might have been American. I'm not sure. Probably British because the British archaeologists were the guys that were really into this stuff. Anyway, back to the mother. So Mary shows up in our world. We don't really have any direct experience with Isis. The Egyptians do, but none of them remember how that went. Are you making notes, Taylor? Mm-hmm. So the Egyptians we're talking to Isis, and I don't know. I guess Sophia was who the Greeks were relating to, and I don't know who the Jews were relating to before Mary, but maybe they have some very formidable ladies in their historical history. And some of them feature in Moses, and some of them feature in Solomon, and some of them feature back into the myths of it. But Mary shows up as perfect feminine, which is why you have a virgin birth, isn't it? You have a human being who has a perfect feminine nature. In other words, a virgin feminine nature, in that it has not been altered or activated or whatever happens when conception occurs. That's an agreement to engage your full nature, emotional, mental, and physical, with someone else's, because you're going to produce a full person. So without questioning the realities of a virgin birth, you're talking about the nature of Virgo, really, which is the virgin in the astrological sense. So you see, all these things all come together in that respect. And in fact, it's the labor of Hercules that is Virgo, the ninth labor of Hercules, where he goes and to capture the Amazon queen, and makes the mistake of killing someone who'd been waiting for him, waiting for a son of God. You see, Hercules is an incarnation of the son of God as a warrior in that story. And he shows up with this challenge of taking the belt of the Amazon queen, which is her, and the belt is around the solar plexus. So she's been protecting that for humanity as the divine feminine. And she's been waiting for him to give it to him. But he doesn't even slow down to ask a question. He just goes ahead and kills her and takes the belt. He had a habit of being a little overzealous in these respects. So, but it shows you that the divine feminine was in charge of things way before we thought about it all. And that this whole thing of protecting the power, the root of power in the abdomen for humanity, is symbolized in her. And in the labor of Hercules, we realize, if we study the story, we realize she was preparing in the Mary aspect to surrender this to a son of God who was committed to love. So she's waiting for that to show up in somebody, which means she already knew about it. She already was committed to that as a divine feminine power, even though she's a warrior controlling everything on the ground. She knows that love's coming somewhere, and somebody's going to show up that I can actually give this power belt to, and they'll treat it with dignity. Well, it just shows what kind of mistake you can make. Because Hercules himself didn't know it. He didn't realize himself that way. But all of his labors are the labors dedicated to reversing yourself on the wheel of evolution or of involution to the wheel of evolution, which is the evolution of love. And people who are against evolution haven't really stopped to think about involution and evolution. Now, involution, which is the nature of the Nazi symbol, it's what differs the Nazi symbol of involution from the Hopi symbol of evolution, which is the wheel spinning backwards or the wheel spinning forwards, going towards love. So all of these things are caught up in our understanding of the mother. But as the mother energy fuels nature in the universe, it's fundamentally love. It's using all the intelligence of the universe, which is what she is. She's not the future. She's not telling us what the future will be. Christ consciousness is doing that. She's not the power of the past. That's what the Father energy is doing. What she's doing is using perfect intelligence to offer you a chance to grow, not to tell you where to grow or to force you to grow. except in the lower kingdoms of matter and plants and animals, where instinct has been empowered to develop those creatures. Mineral creatures and plant creatures and animal creatures and the human creature have been embodied with an instinct by the mother, by the feminine, to grow towards that, but not be forced towards it. See, the thing about love in the universe, in all three of its forms, masculine, feminine, and the sun, is it will not compel. It won't compel growth in any direction. It won't force it. And any being that does force humanity towards a choice it's not freely making is not love. It's something else. And it doesn't mean it doesn't have your well-being in mind. It doesn't mean that it doesn't want to help you. It doesn't mean anything other than the fact that it's not animated by the power of love. But the divine feminine is. Now, how does that work in places where it doesn't work? Like the animal kingdom, where they're out there eating each other and going. Well, that's a study we have to make. So right now, that I've tried to open this up a little to people's inner sense of things. Not to make any of the things that I've mentioned about all of this mythological stuff. And I could do the same thing with esoteric stuff that's in hierarchical stories or ancient traditions that go back beyond the Hindu, back into ancient texts, Tibetan texts, way before that, back to Sanskrit, back to the sacred language behind Sanskrit, sacerdotal language. There are archives of life and how it lived in cycles way before anything we have recorded. But the myths, there are touches of myths in the old stories, like Hercules and things. So we're not talking about how things were going back then, but all of it is according to the same truths. And I think the feminine is one of the most mysterious and important. And in the Hindu Mahabharata, you've got all of these goddesses and gods both. And you've got these masculine and feminine versions of these beings. And you've got Shiva and you've got Kali and you've got all of, well, they're personas embodying to some degree these qualities of the divine. And I think probably Krishna in the Hindu is the Vishnu embody fully the love aspect. I don't think that the stories about them always demonstrate that, just like stories about other beings in myths. But I think that they are that by the nature. And the divine feminine is that. It's committed to love in this universe, not maybe the previous one, but this one. And it's using its intelligence to serve that without any judgment, without any coercion, without any forcing. It just loves intelligently, but not in any direction that has not been given to her in terms of evolutionary instinct in beings. So that brings us down to, an apparition of Mary, for example. The mother of Jesus appears all over the planet to people. And I don't think those are not true. I think they're true. Not all of them, of course, but strange manifestations of Christ mother appears, the mother of Jesus in that respect, because that Christ had not really shown up at birth. It was at the baptism where you get this presence that enters into the space, right? But this perfection of the mother is there so that this could happen. It's a really interesting story. But as she appears now in the world, her appearances are increasing, not decreasing. So we have to ask ourselves, which part of love is this connecting us to? This is the feminine aspect of love. This is the third aspect of love, which in the Trinity, the first aspect is will. The second aspect is love. And the third aspect is intelligence. And that's all we know of life. Life divided itself, being God in this sense, as it creates the universe, it divides itself into three streams cosmically. And one of those is will, the purpose of the whole thing. One of those is love, the object of the whole thing. And the other is the feminine, the mother, the intelligence, but the intelligence is committed to love, to be the mother of the son. And if you're going to be the mother of love, you're committed to it. It's like, I'm in for this. And the father aspect as well is committed to love. And I think that if we saw how it worked with Zeus or with any of these other beings, or Jehovah's the latest singular God version of creative father, you will see that there is nothing else but love guiding all three of these aspects. And when we look at the Jehovah aspect, we don't, because we have personified God, we've made God us, crabby old bastard that will send people to hell and beat up the Egyptians and do crazy shit and take care, pat the Jews on the head and go, okay, you're my buddies, you're my favorite people, well, I'll take care of you and screw these other guys. So you see, that's all us projecting onto some infinite being motives that we would have. Yeah, if someone's breaking into your strawberry patch to steal your strawberries at night, we want to go out and kick the shit out of them because those are our strawberries and we grew them and we're going to feed our families with them. Now, if they knocked on the door and said, hey, you got some strawberries, do you think we could have a few? We'd probably do something like that. We'd probably give it to them, but don't be sneaking in the middle of the night. Then we project onto God this willingness to hurt other people on our behalf, to take revenge, or to be angry. And anger is the problem that Prometheus has vultures picking at his liver for. If you want to poison your liver, just stay angry at everything, and you will eventually. And you'll see the association between liver and alcohol and anger is a big triangle. We get angry, and so we go out and get drunk, because if we don't, we're going to shoot the bastard. So, and I've spent a lot of time with anger. Having been in war, I get a sense of what being angry is about. So when we think about Prometheus and his anger and his pride at having done all this for humanity, he may have never been angry or prideful himself personally, but he sponsored it in us by giving us the sun, the fire of the sun, and teaching us how to think and act and have free will. So free will, and that's kind of where we see free will enter the picture. Everybody else is like, oh my God, it's a God, run for your life, or get on your knees, or offer him some fruit or something, you know? That's what we did with gods. And they were around. Greater beings than us have been around. Zeus, you can think Zeus is a myth, but perhaps not. So, but giving us the power to equalize ourselves to gods creates the birth of the possibility of pride and the possibility of these kinds of qualities and anger. Because when we're angry at something, it's because we don't understand it in terms of love. We don't know how to love it. If you get angry at Johnny, which I'm sure never happens. Never. Or angry at one of the kids, which I'm sure never happens. Not much in your case, I observe. But if we do such a thing, we realize it's only because we don't know how to love them. We fall short. We know how to judge them. The bastard shouldn't have left me waiting here for 2 hours. But we don't know how love caused that to happen. So we get angry about it. But if love caused it to happen in the greater universe of good, then we would see why getting angry is an act against love. If this is a love-based universe, and the divine feminine is love and intelligence, the Holy Spirit, then what are we going to get mad at? It's guided by love. It's infused by love. Its purpose is love. We get the fact that the Son, the Christ quality of the universe, is love manifest, because it manifested in humanity, which is pretty remarkable. So we're not sure about the Father aspect yet. We've still got a lot of judgment around that. But so let's flip from the mother aspect of love to the Father aspect of love for just a minute. Is the Father aspect of love missing love in any way? Or is that our projection upon it because of our lack of understanding and the fact that Prometheus gave us fire? There's lots of things we can look at. But if we want to think that Jehovah is punishing people, as the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam says, why would the potter break the pot he marred in making? It's not something that you need to do with humanity. You don't have to judge them. You can judge the pot and say, it's not perfect. I need to put it back in the furnace. I need to start over and make a better one. But that's not a judgment against it, because the Father aspect is planting the seed, and the seed has the DNA in it. And the mother has her DNA as well. But the Son's DNA is coming forth from wherever DNA comes from. It's coming forth with that joining of the seed and the DNA of the Father. So what is there to judge? And so is the creator of all things, which goes forward through birth of child after child after child, is there anything there to be angry at? Is there any reason for the creator of life in producing offspring to be angry? Or is that our lack of understanding the nature of love? And I believe, and I've been thinking about it for a while, when we get down to the bottom line of understanding the divine in this universe, I'm not talking about previous universes, there might have been full of goblins, but this universe, it's pretty obvious is a love-based universe, because that's the object of everything. We're going there. We're committed to it. We're part of it. And if it isn't a love-based universe, I'm going to start it, because I don't want to live in one that isn't. I mean, I don't. And I'm not giving myself such weakness that I can't create love if I want it. And you have to ask yourself, as a woman or a man, are you going to mother or father love in this universe if no one else has? Well, that's kind of the demonstration of Jesus, in the sense that he got pummeled pretty heavily for trying to do exactly that. He's giving birth through himself to humanity, love, pure thing, just like it comes right out of the box. And humanity's reaction to that was very startled, worried, concerned, eventually judgmental, and then murderous. But he didn't alter his commitment to generating that, did he? Not even in the least. And his mother, who we know is a pretty positive creature, stuck with him through the story. Didn't understand why this is happening to her boy, but she didn't rebel against it. She didn't do anything about it in terms of attacking anyone for it. Maybe she got mad. I don't know about Mary. But stuck with him and became his disciple in it and followed after in that path. So, and the disciples are another story. They're culpable on a number of levels, because they kind of bailed on him when he got to the hard place. They could have stood up for him. They could have got up and said, hey, take him down. He's our guy, and he's love, and he's the one that's right, and you guys are wrong, and then got strung up themselves, which is inevitably what the Romans and the Sanhedrin would have done with them, and demonstrated that later. But so they may be culpable about that stuff on some levels, but they came around when they got to the Pentecost thing. They came around and realized he was right. Humanity was having a hard time figuring it out. And so they made a couple of mistakes. So this father aspect, I'm going back to that because we have to stop and ask ourselves, why are we mad at something that we probably created? We probably created all the anger, all the judgmentalism, all the negative actions that have been done in the name of the Father, and they are many, we have projected upon the Father in terms of the life of the universe, when in fact, as Christ himself said, God is love. The Father and I are one. He really did try to tell them, you've made a couple of misjudgments about this will aspect that and they just plowed right by that and said, no, in the name of the Father, we're going to judge you and crucify you, beat you up. They really did beat the hell out of him. If you look at the Shroud of Turin, you see it. And if you look at the Bible's description of the injuries they gave him, they didn't let up. Broke his nose. They did some mean things. Whipped him with those little metal scourgy things and so on. So I think if you stop and spend some time looking within you at the Father, and if you're a woman, and you are, you're going to have a lot of anger and frustration towards the Father aspect. But we do have to pause and say, maybe all of that goes all the way back to Prometheus or earlier or somewhere, maybe back to Hercules killing the Amazon queen. Maybe back there that was us being stupid and not the Father itself. Because if we project it on that, act in its name, do things like that. And if you look at the Catholic Church and what they've been up to for 2,000 years, you'll see a lot of Jesuit activity that is what we would call less than loving, because particularly the Jesuits, they turned the church into a battle between good and evil, between love and not love, which is silly because it's like light battling darkness. Think about that. They got a whole thing about light battling darkness, don't they? Everybody does, in this one sense. The science fiction stories, Sigourney Weaver on the alien ship, all of it. But all of that is our projection. What is it that actually dispels darkness? Turn on the light. When your kids go, Mommy, turn on the light, it's because they want the darkness to go away. And it does. Bam. There's the light. So what we're really dealing with is the absence of light, which is not an opposite except in some existential way, meaning some mental version of it. Take all the light out of the room and it's dark in the room. That doesn't give reality to darkness. It gives reality to the absence of light in your organs of perception. Do you think you could take all of the light out of the room by shutting the door? No. Turn out the light. No. How many different frequencies of light are still in the room that your child is not seeing? But there are children who look up in the room and go, wow, there's a big angel right in the middle of the room, Mom, and she's blowing out all of this white light, and I think she's really beautiful, and she's telling me she loved me, and then you just go, snap out of it, kid, and get to sleep. Because we don't know how to deal with things that are in other frequencies. Your child may see them and may interact with them, but that doesn't mean we can, and our fear of those things is an act of darkness. We project darkness from that fear. So when you think about these things, and everyone should, and they should look, not just with their thoughts, thinking is your past. How we've accumulated all of our past is in our thinking. But how we see what's really up around us is our future. Your inner senses, your inner awareness of love in the feminine, love in the Son, love in the Father, your future with that is going to be filled with light, isn't it? And it's going to be filled with consciousness, and it's going to be filled with joy, and it's going to be filled with these things that we actually know, come out of love. Now, I think, and that's enough to say about the three streams of love, because if we're good at the Love Foundry, where we're working on how to empower your life with love, how to bring that into a higher activity of with your free will. You cannot violate free will anytime, anywhere, ever. Anything that does is something that hates love. And there are people who can get all womped up on hating love one way or another. But love itself can't. So when we think about dispelling hatred, dispelling anger, dispelling it's like Prometheus saying to Zeus, why are you pushing back on me? Why are you trying to tell me I was wrong to give this fire to these people? And Zeus is not telling him he's wrong. He's not punishing him for doing it. He's pushing back against humanity's urge to develop negative conditions in itself. See, if you look at the story from a different point of view, then we realize that Zeus sees this is coming, and it's too late. The cat's out of the bag. So what am I going to do now? I've got to get these guys to have a little self-awareness and think about what's up, because otherwise they're going to create some serious problems for themselves and maybe for him. I don't know. But so looking at the Father, which is probably the most, there's more swirly negativity around the pole of the Father, because that's dynamic, that's acting, that's the will. But at the same time, we don't find a single thing in Jesus' life against Joseph. We don't find any complaint. Nobody even was complaining about his carpentry. He's like, he's okay. He's, and we don't know, maybe he this or maybe he that. I mean, he was a guy, but it's all outside of the family. I mean, he did have to come to terms with this Bible story about virgin birth, but we don't know the truth of that, actually. We know what the church is telling us and what somebody decided to make. And remember, it was I think it was like 300 when the church got together and decided we're going to make it a virgin birth no matter what. It's immaculate conception. I don't like immaculate conception in a physical way, personally, which just doesn't do a damn bit of good about truth. It's just my version. I don't like it because it's not natural. And when I want love to evolve in humanity out of us, I want it to do it in a natural way. I think resurrection's natural because I think when any mineral reaches a stage of complexity and evolution, like uranium, it starts to radiate itself out of existence. And I think that's true of human beings, which is why spiritual beings are radioactive in the sense of radiating out of the material form. Without ending their life, it just carries them up into a higher level of existence. So I'm okay with resurrection. I'm not okay with immaculate conception, although I suppose the universe is immaculate conception when you get down to it. What they call in the esoteric world the rootless root, or the causeless cause. Where was the seed? Where was the fructification of the seed so that the universe could be born? So perhaps it goes all the way back to that. Surprisingly enough, I'm not that smart. But I do believe that the three streams of love are necessary to purify our own fatherhood, which we all have. Fatherhood, we have motherhood, and we have the sonship in us. All of us do. And we have to purify those streams of life that enter us and give us the power to father. Every woman can father whatever she wants. And that's why great art and great invention, Madame Curie, who killed herself with radiation poisoning in giving the science of it to humanity. Any woman or man can be both mother and father and son. So my point is, look within, see if those three streams resonate. And I think at the Love Foundry, when we work out a workshop for all of this, we have to take into account these three different ways. Now, you can also break this. The mother has been around so long in the universal sense that she breaks herself down into other aspects of the divine feminine, like art and science. And that's why the muses in the Greeks, the muses were the forms that the divine mother took. The muse of astronomy and the muse of science, the muse of poetry, the muse, they had a bunch of them. But these are the aspects of the mother that through time have become tremendous centers of intelligent love. And so, and that forms from the one life, that forms the basic Trinity. And then from the Trinity, it forms the seven spirits before the throne of God in the biblical sense. And spirits are the things that give life to stuff. So I think that that's probably all true. But at least we have to stop and consider these pathways in ourselves and how to purify them so that we can be filled with the power of love. If you want to empower yourself with love, it's going to come up against any impurity in you. And if you hate the father, you're pissed at the mother, and you don't even trust the son, then you're going to have a bit of work to do just to bring it up to a place where you can say, maybe I'm wrong about this.
I think the easiest pathway is surrender. The thing that just keeps coming up is, the easiest pathway is surrender to it. You got to just allow the process in instead of pushing against it constantly. Because you just push things away, or and sometimes that's necessary, but surrender is the name of the game as far as just allowing things to come in. And the other thing I was thinking through this.
Well, hold on. Don't go to another thing until we finish surrender.
Oh, yeah.
Because if your father was a pedophile, surrender is challenging.
Yeah.
Because you have to see, these are not mystical things we're talking about. They're not belief things. These are a matter of facing straight into it and saying, how is love, the creator of this, in him, not in me, because I don't plan on pedophiling anybody really soon. But if your father was a pedophile, what is it about love that caused that to happen in him? And that throws the card down on the table and says, okay, I'm going to face this. I'm going to look at this. I'm going to burn through this. And that brings up out of us all the anger that's there, because it fucks up your life. It does. It challenges your life in a way that, and not just because of you, how you deal with, and not that you were pedophile. I'm not telling that to anyone. I'm just saying that your father wasn't perfect, right? No, neither was mine. My mother was nearly perfect, but my father, no. So the point is that nor did he ever pedophile him. He was a Catholic and he loved that sort of thing, but had his problems. So the point is that I don't care what it is. If we're going to look at the father, we're going to see all of these arrows sticking out of him that we have shot into him. He's got more arrows in him than Custer at the last stand, because there was a lot of anger directed at that particular guy. And so, but maybe, and I'm just maybeing it because, and I'm happy to discuss it with anybody, but just maybe love was at the root, because in a love-based universe, there is no root other than love. There's intelligence, but it's not filled with hatred. But if there's karma from a previous universe, then maybe we have to deal with that. I don't know. I'm not a karma expert. I don't know how far back karma goes, but the people who do believe in karma, or there's many people that don't believe in karma, they actually know the difference. We think that people, spiritual masters, there is a place where spiritual mastery leaves belief behind. That's what makes them a spiritual master, particularly a master of love. You have left belief behind. You don't have any beliefs. You've converted all your beliefs to knowing. Because the moment knowing enters on any subject, even the ones we've raised, belief disappears because knowing replaces it. And we have to do the same thing, replace all that belief about this and that and the other with actual knowing. And which is why we seek the instruction of someone like the Christ, who had perfect love going on like crazy, but he didn't give a lot of instruction. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are full of instructions. Do this, do that, don't do this, do that, do that, do that. All these yogas are full of things that are good advice. If you want to free yourself from karma, they're not all wrong, but that's just not what the son of love is doing, because he's not going to violate anyone's free will. The moment you give people a piece of advice and they think you're some kind of freaking authority, then they run around, guess what he said? We have to do this. Now, Paul, who was his disciple, did all kinds of that shit, telling people that sex, and except in the missionary position, crap like this that has nothing to do with love, and judging people for their illnesses, judging people for their proclivities, judging people for their appetites. That's not love. That's Paul. Now, he's acting in the name of love because he took the job, but I don't think I think he had that. Well, he's the guy that wanted to be crucified upside down because he made so many mistakes. So I don't know how he felt about that. But if he said, look, I really fucked up, I'd say, yeah, I think but I also think that they needed the lessons. Maybe they needed the lessons. So maybe you didn't screw up at all. Maybe Judas didn't screw up. Maybe he did exactly what he needed to do to demonstrate how things go in the human world. So I don't know. I'm not talking about any of that because, as I said, I'm not a church guy and I'm not a Bible scholar. I'm just looking at love because I'm absolutely sure it's real. And I'm absolutely sure it's pure and that it has zero negativity or resistance to good in it. So empowering, and I also am sure that by empowering yourself with it against your own resistances, overcoming those resistances leads to an incredible life, a life that's unbelievable. In human terms, it's so unbelievable we don't believe it. And it's easy to convince us of that because the guy who demonstrated it didn't do so well, seemingly. But perhaps Jesus is doing all right now. I heard he's doing fine.
I think so.
Yeah, well, the esoteric guys think that he's in a Syrian body somewhere in the Middle East right now, reincarnated, which would be a surprise to the Syrians and to the Jews and to most Christians. So where does all the truth of that lie? I don't know. I didn't make up that story. But maybe the guys who know where he is didn't make it up either. Maybe they just checked in on him and said, what are you doing in a Syrian body? And he'd say, fixing shit, like I've always been doing. Things got complicated. We started out to fix the world and it got complicated. So, yeah. Anyway, what do you think about all that, Taylor?
Oh, well, what's there to think, really? I mean, you can follow
yeah,
it.
Think is the wrong word. Yeah, think is the wrong word. I'm sorry. I don't mean to force you down that path.
No, but I'm looking at all of this, and to me, it looks like, this mother aspect that we looked at is the greatest servant of all. It's just there to serve. And
with love.
With love, of course. What else is there? And from and the father aspect is too. It's like it's there to serve as well. It's just coming from a different pillar. It's the.
Did you
it's
look?
The one that.
Go ahead. Sorry. No.
Well, it's the one that pushes the activity side of it. Kind of like you brought to the story.
Yes. You have to take intelligent activity. Yeah.
It's like the it's in repose. It's so they're two pillars, but they're the ultimate servants, of that sun, kind of a thing is how it looks to me. It's one building. It's two pillars.
I agree.
Capstone.
You're starting to sound like a Mason.
Well, I'm looking at it.
That's Jason and Bose. That's the two pillars of the Masonic. Which all is the same thing, and that is another example that goes back to the truth of all these things. Did you look at the Sean Ryan conversation with Chris? It's that guy. There's a guy, I forget his last name. Oh,
Chris
Bledsoe.
Bledsoe. There you go.
Yeah, Bledsoe. He does an interview with him, and I don't know Chris at all. I don't know Sean Ryan. He's up there with Joe Rogan in terms of followers and people who watch his show, because he has a definite instinct for finding the edge where humanity is pushing against. But the thing I found compelling about his interview with Bledsoe, and if anyone hasn't watched it, I recommend you watch it without any judgment or prejudice, just watch him, is he's such a fascinating character.
Oh, gosh.
And as you watch him telling his story, he's a Southern boy from like North Carolina, somewhere up there in the Hickory Woods. And
he's close to Fort Bragg, wherever that is.
Yeah, that's up there in the South. Where he's living now, close to Fort Bragg, may not be as where he always was, but he talks about North Carolina a little bit. But you see in him, this very American person. I would say human because it's very human in any culture, but it's very American. It's
like a good old boy.
A good old boy. He's like, I got stuff and I'm going forward with it.
But kind of guy. Yeah.
But yeah, he's a never quit guy, just like Kit Carson. And look, when you're raised in the South like that, Daniel Boone lived there. And his family still lives there. There's Boones all over the place. Those guys were prolific as hell. They Boone County, Boone Country, Boone everything. And but the point is that he just kept going. I mean, life just delivered him one back slap after another. And the interesting thing is he's raised in the Baptist church. That's very Southern American. And then he goes to the Pentecostal church to please the woman he marries, and which has really taken a step even for the Baptists, because now we're talking some pretty out there Christian stuff, which goes to you have to study something about the Pentecosts. They're amazing. These are the guys. Remember Wigglesworth I talked about earlier?
Yep. Wigglesworth was guys.
Yeah, the speaking in tongues guys, because it was about spirit. The Pentecostals are about what happened when Jesus returned from the dead, from the resurrection, and dropped the Spirit, the Holy Spirit. Remember, we're talking about Holy Spirit. Dropped the Holy Spirit onto the guys that were going to carry on the fight, because he was out of the game. He'd been benched. Once you hit crucifixion, he couldn't stay in the world in physical form. They had to carry the Christianity story forward, so he gave them something to run on, which was apparently very effective because it produced that all over the world, in spite of the Romans' best attempts to extinguish it.
It's amazing.
So
really.
It is. If you stop to consider how things get done, it is more than amazing. But so the Pentecostals had a big revival around the 1860s. Something came into the world and came into America. It came into England. It came into the world. And all the people who were really Christian, I don't know what happened in the Catholic Church, probably something similar, but I never paid attention to that. I wasn't around in the 1860s. But historically, I didn't see it either. Anyway, they had this big revival, and it created the Pentecosts. And they were people who were connected to this spirit, that if you downloaded the spirit of Christianity, which is the spirit of Christ, you could do miracles. And they ran around doing really crazy shit. And Wigglesworth was a British version of it, is one of the most interesting to me because of his complete dedication to Christ. And will. See, this is a very masculine demonstration because of the spirit aspect. So anyway, Chris, the guy we're talking about, joins the Pentecostal church, and that sets him off on another path. And then when all these things start happening to his life, which was him encountering and they've thrown him into the UFO group, but he doesn't actually belong in that group.
Yeah, that's the part of the interview that gets
Because
a little
he said from the beginning, a UFO is an unidentified flying object. And when a
Right.
giant orb of light appears on the horizon and rushes towards you, that's an unidentified flying object. So, but whether that comes out of another dimension, which is what a lot of people think, or whether it comes from Ganymede or some planet out there in the universe, we don't know. We don't know yet when it's rushing towards us. And when seemingly little people start popping up around him, he's not sure, obviously. And he's a Christian, a Pentecostal. And so they have a great belief in Satan, and they have a great belief in negative spirits and forces. I'm not saying I don't. I'm not saying I do. I'm just saying they do. So what happens is the church immediately thinks he's nuts, and they start judging him as possessed by demonic. So him and his whole family, which is the most important thing in his life, get thrown into this Southern. Nobody can judge you like the Southern bigots can.
That's true.
I mean, it's like they're masterful at it. And on top of all of that, he's a trained commercial pilot. He spent years at it because he didn't want to be a carpenter like his dad and make furniture out of hickory. So it's interesting. And then, of course, the story goes forward and gets even more bizarre as you go. But these aren't non-events in his life. And his diseases that he gets over and the other problems. And so you just watch this and you go, what's going on? And then, of course, you get to the project, and then he gets this thing going with the mother, which brings you back around to this mother nature, to this virgin thing, to this spirit of life. So it's an interesting expression of something going on in humanity, because it's there. It's on YouTube. Take a look. But you don't have to judge it. But you can ask yourself, this is something that the human race has produced, experienced, moved itself forward, turned it into enough events that there's a story, and then put the story on Ryan's show, his podcast show, so that 11 million people can watch it. So that's something that's actually a function of human expression. Elon Musk didn't do it. Trump didn't do it. Power players didn't do it. This is something that our human people, very human people like him and Ryan, those guys are very human. They're American humans, which means they're nutty in the way Americans are nutty. But it's an honest expression of their daily life. Now, that doesn't mean he's not whatever. You can decide this is whatever if you want to. But I just look at those things and see, where is this leading? Where are we going with this? Now, where do you think it's going?
Well, I think the whole thing is a consciousness thing. I think the whole thing, from all the way back to Prometheus before. And I almost disagree with you a little bit in the fact that I think there is a common thread that runs through the whole story. I think,
of course, there is. Has to be.
Yeah, and I think that the things that developed in the way they did, and we're quick to judge them, except if you really stop to look at those things throughout history, even the aspect of, humanizing gods and things like that. But how else did the people have any way of relating to something that big without, in some way putting something between it? And it may have been a mistake to put something between it, instead of letting it just be pure in that aspect. And that's part of our struggle, is recognizing that and, going right to the source of the other side of things instead of putting stuff between it, and purifying it in our own self and our own consciousness. But that's where I think it's going. I think it's purifying the whole thing, and not that it's all about making it make sense, because that's completely not the point at all. But the purification of the whole thing and the love aspect of the entire thing is where we're going. It's what's up. That's it.
I agree. I agree. I don't know what part of what I said you disagree with, but it's misstated.
Sorry.
if you did.
Okay. Okay, good. We're in
Well,
agreement.
well, I don't know, because if I said something that you disagreed with, that's possible because my limitations.
Oh, it's okay. And I,
No, it's not. It
yeah.
is. I mean, of course, it's okay because we're all, as Paul said, looking through a glass darkly, and only love itself has a perfect point of view. That's the only perfect point of view because it's a completed point of view.
I remind myself of that
Yeah, you
100
do.
times a day.
I do because
Because I know
it,
I'm the one that's not seeing it,
right. It keeps us humble.
Yeah, I have a natural tendency. I'm a Virgo too, so I can judge the shit out of anything, without even realizing I'm doing
I
it.
frequently do.
But I try to catch it, and just put that love perspective there. Even if I'm not able to hold the whole love perspective, I can at least acknowledge the fact that love has the perfect point of view. I'm just not seeing it. And that brings me to humility and humbleness. And then I can give reverence forth instead of judgment, which that's where I'm at with it.
I think that's great. Yeah, to try to atone for your judgmental past.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a
So there's some people just
bitch, I don't mean to be, but it's
no, I can be really judgmental, and being an ex-Marine, it can arise to a level of demonstrated anger, but I think that there are a lot of different approaches to this problem of not having a perfect understanding or a perfect point of view, and we can. There's nothing wrong with judgment. Judgment is discrimination. Discrimination does not imply condemnation. Judgment seems to imply condemnation. Like Judge Roy Bean, the hanging judge.
well, no, I get that. It's a tool too, I do apologize, Dan. I got rugrats running around the background, so I may go a little mute so I don't distract from what's actually being said.
We're finished. We're just wrapping up our little talk, and that's great because you can go get the rugrats untangled from whatever trouble they've gotten themselves into.
Probably.
Thanks.
Good.
Thanks,
Dan.
Taylor. We'll get on to this further because purifying these three streams is it's something we have to do if we're going to help people become empowered by love. We're going to have to deal with that in them, not us deal with it in them, but help them deal with it in them, as I have to deal with it in myself, so that I don't inhibit that stream, and that's the miracle of Jesus is the Jewish community is like any other community. They have a lot of foibles and judgments and attitudes and so on, as we've seen in the world right now. And so, but he could take pure love, absolute, the thing itself, and endure it in himself. He had gotten himself to a point, well, he was 30 years old, so he had been through a few lessons of life. But he had gotten himself, huh?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt, and he came from a woman who was pure,
Yeah, he certainly did.
Mother Sophia, Mary, however you want to look at it, she was pure. That's
right.
That's where
so
he
that
came
and that
from
I think that's true. She was unsullied in that sense, and she was a young girl, very young.
Yeah,
I don't
14.
know. That maybe that says something about Joseph, because he did snag himself a pretty young bride. Some might even call it pedophiling if we did it today. But the point is, she's pretty pure, and that's a very spiritually religious group of people in those days. Can't speak for the Jews today, but I can't ever speak for them today or yesterday. But that group were the Gnostics. Those were the people who had incredibly deep conviction about God and how they should relate, and did. And so anyway, Jesus is that guy, and he can endure in himself, in his human nature, that pure nature, which is, I consider it one of the most remarkable things about the story. I don't think I could deal with that, because it would push every single thing to the surface in us instantly that disagrees with it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm still mad at that guy that broke my nose and knocked my tooth out when I was in high school in a football game. I'm not mad at him, but I'm not
You're
in
still
love
tied
with
to the
him.
rock.
Yeah, no,
Walter's
I mean,
eating your
so
liver.
things happen. Well, and then look, that's just one event. I'm more mad at myself for all my own events than I am other people, but that's the story of our story. And when you push all that out into our space to say, what about all that? And which is the story in the Bible about the temptations of Christ. It has to deal with that. If you can't handle that, then you're going to be this. And he handles all that. So, which I don't think the rest of us would do quite as well with, probably, at this stage of our purification of these three streams in us. Anyway, more will be revealed, and we're going to empower people with this, or they're going to empower themselves, but we're clearing the brush out of the way.
It helps.
Yeah, it does help. And if you ever watch the movie, the trilogy movie done by Marcel Pagnot of...
I tried.
Did you try to watch all three? Did you watch
the one where they're in France?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's The Mannion of the Spring.
Yeah, The Mannion of the Spring. I don't remember what happened, but I think they're kind of hard to find, those films. And I think
they're
whatever
old
source
30s
I had,
black and white. They're some of the that's film. They did trilogies in those days because it took 3 films to make the story. It was their version of we didn't have TV, so it was their version of telling a long story in 3 films. And our American version was 1 film called Fanny, Fanny, which is her story. But if you want to see the true story of how this went, you have to watch the trilogy that Marcel Pagnot was the director made, and Mannion of the Spring is one of them. But the point is that there's a spring that a guy deliberately blocks up, which starves a piece of land that belongs to these people of water. And he does it deliberately. And it's the story of how all of this leads into it, how it unfolds, and then what happens when they find out that their entire history, it's a 3-generation story. And they find out that the whole muck of their family was bent and destroyed, and people killing themselves over what this person did to block up their stream of flow from their own well, or their own artesian well, fountainhead. He blocks it up so that they can't have water, so that he can buy their land cheap. And what that does to him as a person, and what that does to them. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story. It's a love story, but it's also the love story of how this distorts and how we do these things. So anyway, I just throw little historical bits out because people don't know about these things. I'm so old, I've seen it all.
And one more thing, if you want to follow a stream, that last night, my husband's really into music. And so there's this composer, this John Wilkinson is his name, but he did all the movies. Like every iconic movie you can think of, he did the music
like
to
Danny Elfman.
I mean, he did, the Star Wars, he did Harry Potter, he even did Home Alone. And it's funny because, in this movie, they'll show clips of like these scenes happening without any music to it. And then you'll see the music come to it, and all of a sudden and it's funny, it's like, because you see all these movies he did, and they're all the most iconic movies of several generations that spanned,
Danny Elfman did something like that.
Yeah, and it's like, it's funny because you see the common thread there is this bringing it together through the orchestra, through the music, through the...
No, that's the emotional content. That brings the feeling, that brings the love with all of its attendant feelings. Mm-hmm. See, love is
brings it all to life. It breathes that kind of spirit into the movie.
It does, because
the only reason I brought it up is it's a cool way to see how common threads can pull together things.
Well, what did they do? They did a documentary on him?
Yeah, it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. Well, that's worth knowing. The first movie they ever did this with, by the way, was King Kong.
That's interesting.
And when you watch King Kong, the original version, it's all the way to them going to the island and getting ready to go see what's going on the island and getting down to a certain point. There's no score. There's no music score. And then at a certain moment, the music score crashes into the story,
Right.
and it becomes King Kong. And it's fantastic if you see that. That's something you wouldn't notice if you just watch the original version, because it just happens to you.
Right. All of them. All the movies.
Yeah, and if you want to study what geniuses have done in film, like Lucas and Spielberg and King Kong, who's the German guy.
So he did every single Spielberg film. Just on a side note.
But he didn't write all the. Well, Williamson did. Oh, Williamson. You said Williams.
Oh, sorry.
John Williamson is the guy that wrote the big opera. He did 2001, I think. Did he do 2001?
I'm not sure. I don't recall.
I'm not either. But he did all the great Superman type themes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, he was fantastic through there of writing. He's good about writing anthem things, where it explodes out of the spirit.
Yep.
Yeah. Those are special people whose gifts those are, and him with Lucas doing that visually turned science fiction into Star Wars.
And he did all of them, even the latest ones, because he said anytime he does a film, he tries to do the sequel always, because he wants it to have a continuity throughout the whole thing, instead of some new composer coming in, and it's dying because everybody's going to digital, and so that.
No, that's right. I'm an analog guy. I had a recording studio that was all analog, and I remember the day that digital crashed the party.
Yeah.
And you knew looking at it that you couldn't go back to analog. Right. So we have to go forward through digital till we get back to something that is not analog, but it's beyond analog. And that's the difference between emotion and love. Mm-hmm. Because love is basically perfected emotion. If you perfect all emotions upward in vibration, you will eventually arrive at love, no matter what.
Oh, which reminds me, I want to maybe talk about next podcast, because we can't keep opening boxes on this. But and I'll talk to you on a side note, so it's not worth bringing up now because it'll open it up. So
don't tease them.
So stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, Taylor. Go wrestle kids. I got to go do a few things too.
Bye, Dan.
See you later. See you. Oh.
Aloha.
Don't you wanna know?